So this morning, you guys, what we're going to talk about is the process by which the Foundation vets and accepts abstracts. We're also going to talk a little bit about how we choose the people that vet those abstracts for us. And for those of you who don't know me, again, I'm Chuck Griffiths, and I am a member of the AANA Foundation, proudly so. We support a lot of important programs for the advancement of nurse anesthesia, our profession, and of course for the safety of our patients. It's my pleasure to be here today talking about a presentation that we've entitled Your Abstract is Accepted. And again, it's about this important process. And I want to just say that we appreciate each and every person that goes through this process of submitting an abstract to us. It's so important for all of us together to advance the art and the science of nurse anesthesia for the safety of our patients. I have no financial relationships with any commercial interests related to the content of this activity, and I will not discuss off-label use during my presentation. So the AANA Foundation has a mission. Our mission is to advance the science of anesthesia through education and research. We have research goals that we set to support new and seasoned investigators in nurse anesthesia through poster presentations, grants, fellowships, and postdoctoral fellowships. Our programs are all designed to develop researchers in nurse anesthesia. There's great opportunity at the Foundation for researchers, and that's actually what this presentation is all about. It's an opportunity for CRNAs and nurse anesthesia students to present their research findings and innovative educational approaches, again, to patient safety and the advancement of anesthesia through oral and poster presentations. Research, literature reviews, case studies, and innovative and creative techniques in anesthesia are all appropriate topics for researchers to be submitting to the Foundation for presentation to our entire community. Our research agenda that we set prioritizes healthcare policy at this point because of the competitive atmosphere that we all practice in. We just launched a new campaign called Rise Above, to which you can contribute. And this is going to help us to do more healthcare policy research. We also certainly investigate the bench science behind anesthesia and upon which the foundation of our superb clinical practice is based. We also accept topics on the education of nurse anesthetists, and certainly topics that address the actual clinical practice and techniques behind anesthesia, and topics of leadership. These are all of interest to our community. In the process of creating an abstract, let's look at a brief summary here. There's three basic kinds of abstracts that we're looking at that are submitted to us. The first one is a research study that has its results. The second one is an evidence-based project, review of the literature and implementation into practice. And the third kind of study that we usually see is a case study, but not just any case study, a case study that actually provides us with an analysis and lessons learned of something unique that's happened to us as nurse anesthetists in clinical practice. We always welcome these experiences. So what about creating an abstract? An abstract absolutely has to have final findings and a summary. We do not accept preliminary or incomplete abstracts, and we don't look at pilot studies for actual discussion at our meetings. We want you to get that stuff out of the way and then submit your completed studies to us for presentation and discussion. Let's talk about research now. Research is actually the discovery of completely new and novel knowledge in a way that it's going to advance nurse anesthesia practice and theory and the safety of our patients. New knowledge. Evidence-based abstracts describe the implementation of current best evidence for best practices when we actually do anesthesia. When we make those important decisions regarding patient care with a potential impact to anesthesia. And finally, again, case studies, we're looking for unique clinical cases that impacted anesthesia care and that will guide us all to safer care in the future. You absolutely must have IRB and IACUC if it's an animal project approval. The reason is because this demonstrates to us that the study's been vetted through this process, that it has the appropriate weight and the appropriate protections for the subject in the study. Encore presentations are welcome. You may have presented this research at other scholarly venues. And now let's talk a little bit about the abstract itself. Starting with the title and the author, keep the title brief and informative and simple, but I would say to you, again, in the context of having seen 30 posters yesterday, which were all wonderful, make that title accurate. Make sure that what you have in your title reflects what you're actually doing in the study. Your list of authors needs to include at least one cRNA or sRNA, and you need to list the author's credentials in the required order. All of this will be specified for you in the application process. As far as your background and literature review, it's always going to be a part of an abstract and of a study report. The introduction should outline the research that's already been done that supports your theory or your hypothesis that you're testing, or describes your case. You demonstrate what's already known about your subject. You conclude with the question that you intend to answer. The paragraph of introduction that you have always concludes with something like, thus in the current study, we plan to investigate the effect of XYZ on XYZ. Describe your purpose very clearly so that the people walking by looking at your poster or that you're describing your study to understand clearly what it is your intention, and include a strong impact statement, because we get many, many applications for abstract presentations. And unfortunately, we can't take them all. One of the ways that we vet them is to say, does this study have sufficient impact that it should be included as a report at one of our scientific meetings? It has to have an impact on the profession and preferably leading to safer patient care. Materials and methods section is very important because it describes how your study was conducted. You need to talk about your means of how you collected your data, what the setting was, the participants and population, any relevant variables that you're looking at, and basically what we're looking for when we look at that is the who, what, when, where, how was the study conducted, so that we can make sense of the results. Results-wise, you want to summarize your results very concisely, and I always tell people it's better to do this with bullet points rather than a lot of writing on a poster. Compare the outcomes between any important subgroups in your study and present your data again in a clear but use bullet points for brevity of being able to take it in. Make your poster visually appealing by using charts, tables, and pictures. What about the tips for creating a poster? Ideally, it needs to be visually appealing. Colors are always good. Containing, again, adequate and accurate bullet points and graphs that are easy to grasp. Make sure it's large enough to be read from about 3 feet away. And again, this is a challenge for all of us because we have so much stuff to cram into that poster. And communicate your research in a simple way, because in this kind of venue, in this kind of setting, people are walking by, they only have a couple of minutes to really grasp what you're trying to get across to them. More tips about creating a poster. This has always been helpful to me. A lot of times what I'll do is create a mock-up before attempting my final version, because what it helps me to do is know the problems I'm going to encounter. Place the most important information at eye level as people walk by. Make sure the information provided can be comprehended very briefly in 5 to 10 minutes. That's why you have to be clear and concise. And don't get too fancy. Don't use a lot of jargon or abbreviations that people aren't going to be familiar with, because it's going to pass completely over their head and they're going to move on to the next poster. Mistakes to avoid. You want to avoid these common pitfalls. Don't have a vague or unfocused abstract. You need to be precise when you're presenting your findings to the community of interest, or they won't be able to understand them. If it's lacking in originality, if this study's been done 25 times before, then we may say, I'm not sure we need a 26th study here. Failing to acknowledge potential difficulties when you're planning and actually conducting the study. It's very important in your weakness section that you acknowledge all the weaknesses and challenges that you face, because people expect that. And it helps people to interpret the results, which is very important. The conclusions are not supported by data. This is a mistake you do not want to make. You want to very carefully, when you state a conclusion, look at the data supporting it and make sure every statement you make can be supported by your data. Experiments seem irrelevant. Again, you want to make sure your study has an impact on the practice and safety of nurse anesthesia. Too ambitious, we see a lot of times where people start out with an idea, but you have to pare it down for the real world. For the research strategy section, again, this is where you're finding new knowledge. What's the significance of the finding to the safety of our patients and our practice? Is it innovative, new, something we haven't seen before? And what's the approach? Is it feasible? Is it something we can understand? Again, for research strategy, the significance section should demonstrate the importance of the work. Its impact on the safety of patients is primarily what clinicians are looking for. Demonstrate how the research will advance the field of nurse anesthesia and improve practice, and consider the longer-term, bigger impact of the research. Some of the common mistakes that people make when they're presenting the significance of their study, or when they're comprising a study and not really considering the significance. It will not advance science. It lacks compelling rationale. It's incremental and low impact research. These are all problems with the significance of the research that we see. So anytime you do a study, you want to make sure you think of all of these different sections and make sure the answers are correct. Common mistakes as far as the approach. Too little or too much detail in trying to tell the story of your research. Not enough preliminary data to establish feasibility. Again, remember the people that walk by would want to know, is this really feasible? Did they really do what they said they did, and did they find what they seem to describe? The feasibility of each aim is not shown. Again, people want to know this. You want to check in your final review of what you're going to present in public. Typos and grammatical errors, a big no-no when you're doing a scientific presentation. This needs to be right on. Ask someone outside of your project team for feedback. After a while, you can't see the mistakes because you're too close to it. Hold a mock review panel. This has always been useful to me because always mock review panels point out things to me that I didn't even think about. And think about the questions you would ask if you were a reviewer looking at your own research. Does the study have merit? What is the potential impact on nurse anesthesia and the safety of our patients? How novel is the proposed work? Is the hypothesis and research question valid? Is it something that really can be answered by the methodology that we have proposed here? And is there evidence that I now am presenting that supports the answer that I came to? How do we select the people that review our projects? Well, it's actually a very careful vetting process. We have them submit an application packet. It consists of a curriculum vitae, a CV, with a statement of interest. The AANA Foundation board then reviews the applicant's qualifications carefully, and the AANA Foundation board then invites suitable candidates to serve as reviewers. An appropriate paperwork has to be submitted. There's an entire process that we go through, and we're very careful about who reviews these projects for us. So thank you for your attention. This is just a brief presentation to kind of get you involved with the process of how we vet the way of coming to presenting our projects. Are there any questions from anybody about this process that I can answer for you? Seeing no questions, thank you for your attention, and I'll turn back over to Will McGillis. Thank you, guys.